Well, there, hello everyone. Talk about over here about questions about moments though, and let's just say that if it's gonna be anything that's in regards to any sorts of test or anything like that, or pop quizzes or something like that. But you have right here talk about for moments, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way. That what does it usually mean? Whenever you go ahead and ask the questions, and then maybe if you're asking a partner the questions or something like that, and want to know too a lot of times that you're going to maybe be asked why, and a lot of times it's like that you know what do you call that usually a lot of times, that whenever there's one question after another, and it's like there's maybe not just even just a few minutes or so of a pause before you go ahead and start asking even more questions. So it sure seems that way, that the one part of the conversation kind of goes on whenever the more somebody asks the questions a lot of times. And it's like a lot of times if we're talking about so many of them out of a row, and then you're talking about that about how much information do you think is just a little bit too much and all, but really that what does that usually mean? Whenever you do I'm like, whenever if you do start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say they're going to be asking you a lot of questions a lot of times, and have right here talk about for why do moments always start out with a strange look. And like what I mean by is that this is saying, or not for a special hug means for support, right? Does it, and why? So what I mean by this is to where if you're going to be asking somebody a question, though, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that if you want to kind of call it like the narrative way of speaking, or just that somebody's going to include a question in a complete sentence like that, and you'll want to know too that whenever it comes to that whenever it comes to talk about moments, though, moments to where you know you you think and smile. You think and smile, and just think to your mind what happens next. So a lot of times it seems like that's usually kind of like what you call the narrative. And like everybody else would say too, that especially if we're talking about any source of relationship or something like that, and you're likely want to know too that whenever it comes to moments, and to where that you think about them, and you smile and think about your mind, what happens next. So if you were to write a complete sentence, and let's just say that if you were to ask the question down here on the bottom, and let's just say that if that question is maybe going to be about as to where that nice at times you're having a great time, right? And so it sure seems that way, that whenever we're talking about any source of relationship, though, or anything such as getting to know each other or something like that, and a lot of times it sure seems that way, that you start a conversation by indicating to where that you want to think of a few things that you want to say to somebody, and want to know too that the first thing is to where you think about moments a lot of times, moments in time. And one thing I did want to mention too is to where that one thing that I did want to mention about is talk about for done in 12 hours. So what does that mean if I were to say something like that? To somebody, to anybody, am I done in 12 hours? And and a lot of times it's like especially if we're talking about any source of agendas or improvements or something like that. But a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when if somebody were to say nice, mean that you have a great time, done in 12 hours. But I was talking about my career, in process. So let's just say that if you were to write a sentence like that, and you want to know too that to word it, yeah, you go ahead and write a letter like that, and let's just say that if you were to go ahead and start like down here, if you were like, yeah, change the body, lyrics right there to like maybe yeah, change that to like what yeah, something like that, and then going right on here a question, and that question's maybe going to include it like a little change, a little bit of the type, character right here, and you have right here of yeah, but I'm like, yeah, it says on what type of okay, analysis of pro, medium, but anyway, so if I were to be asking the questions a lot of times, and it sure seems that way, that if you are good at putting things together, yeah, good at putting things together, solving problems. So it sure seems that way that a lot of times that if you want to go ahead and answer a certain question, and let's just say that yeah, do you really have to explain all the details about what is it that you do, and on your hand too, you maybe quote toward that explain, well, what do you mean by that? I'm like, yeah, well, it's what I mean by is being creative. So a lot of times, what does that usually mean? If I were to say something like that, and like anybody would probably say too, that if you were to answer a question, and like I have that in bold right here, but let's just say if the answer was right here. So if you were to ask above, you ask the questions, and then if you were to give a reasonable answer, and then let's just say that if you were to say something like, yeah, being creative, what does that mean? So if I were, I'm like, yeah. So if I were to put on here, what does that mean? And then maybe like, well, why? So a lot of times it's like, yeah, why? What? What are you talking about? So really, is that really a complete sentence right there? When we talk about starting a conversation, with somebody about something, and half the time you want to know too that the things that we would see on a typical text messages or something like that. But I'm just like want to know too that whenever it comes to trivia questions or something like that, and you want to know too that what does that usually mean whenever you write a complete sentence and you include a question mark on one part of the sentence, and maybe if you include maybe a few one or two curly brackets and maybe a parenthesis marks or something like that, and then also even a smiley face. And you're probably like, well, I know too that what does it mean if you were to put a pretzel right there at the end of the sentence, and along with yeah, that so if you were to be writing a sentence and like you say that what are you talking about, yeah, so it's like hungry for thirsty for tea or something like that, or for a bagel or something like that, and then you go ahead and start out the sentence by I say is toward it whenever when you walk up, yeah, when you with someone, you you are actually yeah, you are actually connected with them some way. So it sure seems that way that does it really have to involve toward it that whenever you do whenever you do start talking to somebody about something, and let's just say that do you feel that connection in some way whenever you just start talking about a lot of things that whenever it comes to whenever you're able to agree on a lot of things, or maybe if it was over the fact about that, any signs and symbols or anything like that. But on your hand too, it sure seems that way. You start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say that you start out that the nest. I'm like, in some ways, and then if you were to say something like is toward it, well, really, do you like to dance? So really, why does that really have to be a question? Really, do you like to dance? And what? So it sure seems that way. That a lot of times, a lot of ladies would say that yes or no. So it sure seems that way that what does that usually mean whenever you do have a conversation like that? And let's just say that the yes or no, go by the choice, and like anybody say that, well, if you were to write the sentence like that right there, and a 102 is toward a well, does that basically mean like anybody telling you that, I need an answer now, to or whenever I ask you a simple question or something like that? Or could that also maybe be a bias toward it, somebody is trying to get a better understanding about, what the reason is, and what you're trying to say, or something like that. So it sure seems that way that when we talk about any sorts of conversations, a lot of times, that we think about moments, right? And a lot of those moments are going to include a hug and a kiss and a handshake or something like that. But dancing or something like that. But you want to know too that what does that usually mean whenever you do start talking about something, and then somebody starts asking you a question? Let's just say that the way that we word this question would also be that you're going to go ahead and include a smiley face right there in between a sentence. And you want to know too that why do you think that you would want to write like that, and if that's really any professional way of how you want to communicate with somebody. And if anybody has ever thought about that whenever you're going to be starting a conversation with somebody, and if you include like any sorts of facial expressions right here, and thinking as toward it, really that what you really are trying to say is that you're just asking questions, and then do you I'm like, what do you like, and then what is it that you do? And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that when I'm like, typical problem solving, and a lot of times it's like, why do you think it would make more sense to ask the questions after the conversation, or maybe after the interview, rather than mixing them up right here in the sentences? So I don't know if there's a particular name for that, but like everybody else would say too, that whenever you're going to be starting out a sentence though, and it's like, a lot of it has to do with whenever somebody interrupts you and asks you a question, whenever you're trying to talk, and then they're going to go ahead and interrupt you, just for a second, and just so that way they can get something off their mind. And I know a lot of times that's usually what happens, is that whenever you're starting a conversation with somebody, and just to kind of get it off their mind, that they're going to go ahead and ask the questions, and you're likely want to know too that that whenever somebody asks the questions, a lot of times, you want to kind of give it a nickname, such as maybe if it's the fruit, if it's the watermelon or the cabbage or something like that. You want to know too that, well, what does that usually mean whenever that information just comes up all of a sudden to your mind, to where you start a conversation about something, It's the watermelon or the cabbage. There's one part of the food group that's considered a vegetable, one part of the food group that's considered a fruit. And whenever you kind of combine those together, and it sure seems that way, that's whenever yeah. If you whenever you take two different flavors, what do you get? Whenever you take two different flavors, if you want to use that as an example, that you kind of you get common sense, right? To where it's kind of like a back and forth conversation. So it sure seems that way. That if you want to look at that like two separate flavors, that whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, yeah, two separate flavors. Whenever it comes to two separate flavors, but then you're trying to make them all into one. Whenever you can at least trying to get somebody else to understand what is it that you were talking about. So it sure seems that way. That whenever it comes to understanding about yeah, somebody's feeling, and then also starting a conversation about something, and that's why it sure seems that way. That whenever you do talk about certain moments, though, and I want to know too that what does that usually mean whenever you do start asking a question, and you whenever you're speaking about something, and like always start out with a strange look, and like yeah, a strange look by that you start talking about stuff, and then that person is maybe going to give you that look as toward it, whatever that's supposed to mean. So the type of look that I'm talking about is that yeah, that the strange look. Well, yeah. So this part of the sentence right here that I'm asking right here, that I talk about the strange look, like that. So yeah. So after this sentence right here, and let's just say that if the other person is maybe going to say is to where that that moment that you're referring to, that moment that you're referring to, right, is about the time we were not expected to meet. So in case of anybody that may want to know too, that do you think that maybe you would want to ask that type of question to where they're not expect to meet, or maybe that you people might even say too that whenever you start a relationship, a lot of times it seems like that whenever you do meet somebody that you were expecting, yeah. Yeah, you were expecting to have a gift ready. You were expecting to have a gift ready, but then it wasn't ready whenever you met. So this is how it turns out. So it sure seems that way, that whenever we talk about any sorts of trading sentences and narratives or anything like that, and you want to know too that a lot of times that why is it that maybe somebody's going to want to ask the questions, and then keep asking until but still it's like, and you want to know too that yeah, somebody asks you a question about something, and a lot of times it's like, yeah, it's a yes or no answer or something like that. Well, why? Well, why? So yeah. Well, why? Well, why? Yeah. So if you want why question mark, and put like a QR. How about QRA? I'm like, what QRA? What does that stand for? I'm like, that's just a simple I thought of, but anybody might want to know too is toward it. Question response acrable or something like that. If you might be yeah, for QRA or something like that. But if we're talking about that, if you're going to be, maybe if we're talking about if you get mad enough, or maybe if anything like if you're trying to type a number of words within a certain time, and you just swipe your finger like this right here and be like this, is like, yeah, well, you know, okay, well, what is it that you're trying to say right there? And so a lot of times it's like, yeah, so if you want to, like anybody else would say too, that, if there's any particular name for that source of text messaging or anything like that, and people want to know too that, well, really, hold CD what? So let's just say that if you were to include any spacing right here in 102, AH, blank, J, DJ blank, GJ, hold CD or something like that. And then maybe if you were to, do like what you call swipe your finger and like just type in a few words like that right there, and people want to know too that, well, okay, what exactly, what exactly is it that you're saying right there? And so it sure seems that way, that whenever you do start out a conversation, a lot of times that it seems like that what's the best way of how to communicate with somebody whenever it comes to, if you got a lot of things on your mind, and let's just say that if you're just trying to type in all these texts and all that, and it seems like to me that would that maybe help to where that maybe if you have like what you call one of those apps to where you can like keywords to where that you can go ahead, and if you're typing in so many words all of a sudden, drawing the line. And I know that whenever you draw a line like that, it's like anybody who may 102, what exactly does that mean whenever you do that? And like I say, well, really. So it's like, I'll just, I'm like, so if you're typing in a few words or something like that, and 102, to how many of us have thought about that, to where if you're trying to say something to somebody, and let's just say if you just do a few squiggly lines like that, and people want to say is to where, okay, whatever that's supposed to mean right there, like I say, why? So a lot of times, you might see that a lot of times whenever somebody says, why? I don't understand. I don't understand. Why? I don't understand. Why? And so you're gonna maybe reply, say something like that right there, and then you're like, so like anybody that might even say too that whenever you're gonna be doing these sorts of text messaging or anything like that, and I want to know too that if there's a certain way of how you want to connect the dots about that, if you just really want to be brief and just set your phone where you can go ahead and certain keys on the keyboard and program to where say certain words. And but on your hand too that if you don't like anybody say that would you really be using the up and down arrows like that and just type in a word and you 102 that really that if you like so something like that. And so when we use when we take down notes or something like that, and you 102 that whenever if we're going to be scrambling also or so if we're going to be typing something real fast on our keyboard, a lot of times you're going to be saying words, and maybe that a lot of things people don't understand, or if you're going to be mad about it, and let's just say that somebody's going to maybe say something like, what? Well, what'd you say? Or something. So a lot of times it's like, So it sure seems that way that whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, and knowing by say the gift of kindness, and then also whenever it comes to people may want to know too that if you ask somebody, I'm like, include a burger and fries or something like that, along maybe with some popcorn or something like that. People may want to know too that do you think, if anything, that you go in just if you see that they're mad about something, you can just text them something like that with a simple like that, and just saying that okay, well, calm down, I'll buy you some popcorn and we can go and talk about it. Meet me at the park or somewhere like that, or yeah, we'll be able to talk about it. And so it sure seems that way that when we talk about messages, trading messages, and something like that, and you're one of too that a lot of times that goes by the conversations to where when somebody asks the questions a lot of times, and that's whenever you feel like saying this to where that how far does the conversation really go before you really start getting mad at the questions? And everybody else might even say too that really that whenever you do start a conversation, a lot of times that you would probably get mad at so many questions that are asked, and then this person is on a high demand on how you respond to those questions, and so a lot of times it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to anything such as dating relationship, or if it's anything such as to where if you're trying to get a job done or something like that, or trying to think of some narratives and all of that, and you want to know too that in order to be able to write a complete sentence a lot of times, that you really think about is just to where you write a complete sentence by saying is toward it doesn't have to include a subject, or does it really have to include any source of emotional feeling, or what that person is thinking about, or maybe anything else that they want to add to the sentence or something like that. And so every time we want to write a complete sentence, a lot of times, then why do you think that most of everybody else would include a question mark between their paragraphs, and then go ahead and start out a new sentence, and let's just say that you're going to go ahead and put a sticker right there, and maybe if you're going to put one with the tongue sticking out like that, and then put on there moments, or where I'm like, yeah, and then if you want to put like happens and what happens next or something like that, like everybody say that really that if you're going to be talking like that, then want to know too is toward it you would at least X quotation points or something like that, or parenthesis marks or something like that, and so you probably want to know too that maybe the only reason why you would want to include that in any source of word and saying is maybe because of the fact about that it's supposed to be what you call a special moment. If you want to highlight that in bold or something like that, what happens next. And so it's like, yeah, so if you were to include that a lot of times in a lot of sentences, though, and you want to know too that what exactly is it? If like a compound sentence or something like that, or surprising, silence, and then also action verbs, and then maybe pronouns or something like that. So it sure seems that way that when we think about the words of speech right here, and that you want to know too that whenever you first start a conversation, a lot of times that it seems like to me that a few simple questions should involve a few simple answers. But at the same time, it sure seems that way that whenever somebody's going to be asking, well, why? Well, why not? And so, yeah, so get ready. And, for why not? So, a lot of times, I notice that a lot of times, whenever I'm having conversations with somebody, a lot of times, over the phone or by messaging or whichever, that it's like, why not? And well, why? Well, what's wrong? And what's wrong? What's wrong? Where? What does that mean? So a lot of times it sure seems that way that do most of our questions seem to be more annoying than compared to like whenever you core like so like anybody will probably say too that whenever you do start out the sentence a lot of times it seems like to me that most of the time most book authors would probably use that as a source of saying just so that way they can get feedback most of the time. Most of it is feedback most of the time. But if we're talking about anything related to anything about a typical conversation, and let's just say that what does that mean whenever you say that? And so it's like, yeah. So whenever you're talking about something, maybe making a statement about something, and it sure seems that way that you heard that before toward it, yeah. You should not should not ask questions. You don't that you don't want the answer to. So a lot of times it's like yeah. So if I don't know, put a period right there, but anyway, so it sure seems that way that you usually that you would probably go ahead and put a period right there, and you just kind of like in a quote to word it, because it's not but still that on the other hand that whenever it comes to whenever you're trying to write a sentence, a lot of times though, that it seems like that most of the time that whenever you're trying to ask somebody a question, a lot of times it sure seems that way. That do you think that you get more aggravated the more somebody asks a question, and also whenever it comes to they're trying to get some common sense out of the conversation, they're just trying to get to know the situation, or a lot of things that they're not quite understanding, and that's why it sure seems that way that that you always ask the question to her, why do moments always have to start out with a strange look, or if anything, does it always have to, include any sorts of aggravation, or if anything that, somebody is just being concerned or something like that. And so a lot of times it sure seems that way that, why is it that you would want to include a few questions right here at the sentence right here, but still, and start out with the new sentence right here, like nice mean that you're having a great time. I'll have it done in 12 hours or something, and then but I was talking about my career and process. So let's just say that if somebody was saying is toward getting copies made or something like that. Getting copies made. I should have that done in 12 hours. And, let's just say that, I should have that, done in 12 hours or something like that. And so it sure seems that way that whenever you start writing to somebody a lot of times, and by say that, yeah, well, how many, yeah, how many copies or something like that, yeah, how many copies. Anybody might even say too that you would really you would ask that question if anything, but whenever they say, well, if they need it, like, yeah, copies of something, if you need it by Friday or something like that. But still, that on the other hand, that so if you were to be talking about stuff, and it's like, yeah, well, what does that mean? Why, what, and so it sure seems that way. That everything seems to be a simple question, simple answer at about right up here. But then it sure seems that way that, yeah, whenever you take too long to respond. So whenever somebody, yeah, take too long to respond right there. And so it sure seems that way that when we're talking about conversations, though, and it's like you want to know too, is to where that, yeah, that whenever we've probably seen it before, that you include a period right there, and along with the add a word right there, and half the time you want to know too, why is it that people do that, to respond. you to reply hello. Yeah, reply reply hello. Yeah, well, how many of us have seen that before? So if you're going to be talking to somebody, and a lot of times you see period, hello, and then period, and then it next line, and then it goes by maybe something like and, copy, period, 5, 5 and 8 and 9 or something like that. And so it sure seems that way that whenever we think about writing text messages or anything like that, and that you want to know too is to where that in order to be able to write a complete sentence a lot of times or talking about any sort of story though, that you want to know too that why does it have to be any confusing to what it is, especially like anybody will want to know too that if you're going to be writing a letter, and that pretty much means is toward it that you should be allowed to finish the complete sentence than compared to, somebody maybe interrupting you and want to ask you a question, or if it's anything that's going to include like what you call, trading responses or something like that. But on the other hand, it sure seems that way that whenever you're talking about a conversation that's being recorded like on a script though, then I guess to say that that's different than compared to the typical letters that we've seen written. So if we're talking about like on chat, then of course you're going to be seeing stuff like this, like right here. But on the other hand, if you're talking about writing a letter though, that there's really that until somebody else reads what you got to say about something, or anything about what's coming to your mind, and then but still it's like about like everybody else might even say too that something like this may be recorded even on a transcript though, that kind of it's like an invoice. It's an invoice to where if somebody is trying to listen up to the conversation and want to know about anything that seemed real offensive about what was said, and anything such as starting a conversation, maybe if you're trying to solve a problem or something like that. And that's why it sure seems that way that does it and why and moments to where to thank you and smile, thanks for what it comes to your mind. And so if you were to include any sorts of stickers like that, and like everybody might even say that if you were to prefer it that way, to go ahead and include a sticker right there, like a sticker in between a word of a sentence, and you're wondering to where that okay, why, even with the sunglasses, and maybe if you're going to include a happy face right there, and so really, why would you want to do that? Why would you, while you're typing, why would you want to do that? But like all the other writers might even say too that you would actually do that mainly over the fact about is toward if you're just the common sense most of the time, and I would maybe look at it more like common sense. Well, what does common sense mean? Well, common sense means that you're just you're just common sense. Common sense. You're just trying to be goofy. You're trying to be goofy and funny and just saying things to kind of cheer the conversation up. It seems like it's, and like everybody else would say too, it should be really about the cheering, the cheering, So if you're just trying to cheer somebody up just by saying about making a tease about something, or if anything, adding in a few stickers or something like that, then like anybody, you probably thinking too, whenever you're going to be starting a conversation about something, and just thinking about is this toward it, really, that whenever you do that, does that really just kind of ease off the stress and anxiety whenever you're starting a conversation with somebody about something that whenever you include a smiley face or a sticker or something like that you want to know too that in order to be able to be a professional English writer though, that it seems like that maybe you would do that just to get a better understanding about what you know members of the group, if you're trying to understand what other people are thinking about, and what do you think the positive and negative speeches are saying and all that. So let's just say that on average though, if you're trying to finish off the sentence right here and thinking as to word it, yeah, well, you're going to be asking the questions, right? But who that could be reading this letter one of these days, and so that's usually maybe why everybody would probably do that, is that they're going to go ahead and include a question mark right there, and then maybe ask, well, why not? And so yeah, so it's like so whenever you think about that though, and want to know too that that right there does not really even to look too much like English writing. That right there looks like a discussion. And let's just say that, if most cookbooks were published like that in 102, what exactly is that supposed to mean right there? And, that right there does, that's not anything such as a tablespoon of sugar or, of, maybe a half a tablespoon. I'm like, yeah, maybe a half a cup of milk or anything like that. These are not really the cooking recipes here or the toppings. It's like another way of how you want to call it is toward it whenever you are going to be saying a few words of a conversation a lot of times that they're like the ornaments. It's like a decoration, and to me it's just like a decoration. It's something to cheer the conversation up. Whenever you do start a conversation, you include a smiley face just to cheer the person up or anybody that could be reading this, and to try and get some common sense about what you're talking about, and that's a little bit of reason why that you're probably thinking too that okay, yeah, you go ahead and include a sticker right here and a sticker right there, and then yeah, and even the basketball, and people want to know too that what is all that all about right there, and so yeah, that so the typical greeting cards, and you want to know too that if you're going to be starting a conversation with somebody and be adding in stuff like that, but yeah, the teddy bear or something, but still that. So if you're going to be starting a conversation with somebody, and let's just say that they're going to say what, why, well, why not, and where, and so yeah, I see that a lot of times, and most of the time, it sure seems that way that ways to celebrate and taking yeah, nice, and so it's like you were talking to somebody in some ways, but anyway, yeah, nice talking to you or something like that, and anyway, yeah, special occasions or anything like that, inviting somebody to play a game or something like that, but so yeah, Earth right there, the globe. So yeah, doing things together, so like anybody else would say too, that whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, that do you think that maybe it's whenever you do send somebody an invitation, to participate in something, that do you think that is that really supposed to make that person feel very special? If it's a gift of kindness or something like that, and yeah, car, and I'm just yeah, all kinds of stickers, but but still. But on your hand, that whenever you do write a letter to somebody, a lot of times, and it sure seems that way, that It's like, what does it usually mean whenever somebody's going to be asking a question? Well, why not? Well, what's wrong? Hey, what is that supposed to mean? And so it sure seems that way why is it that maybe people would feel really annoyed whenever stuff like that happens? And I guess it sure seems that way. It's all about the fact about that whenever you are trying to start a conversation with somebody, that it sure seems that way. You know yeah, if somebody's trying to start a conversation, it's like, well, really, it's all about common sense, but then also that like everybody else might say too, that you go ahead and talk until you get on that other person's nerves, and then that's whenever they go ahead and speak up. But still. But I get that a lot of times, is that whenever I'm talking to somebody, even over the phone, about something, and it seems like to me that you just feel like telling them, listen, okay, don't worry about it, okay, don't worry about it, and yeah, don't worry about it, and so if you're going to be saying something, like that, exclamation point, don't worry about it. So if you're going to be writing like that, don't worry, don't worry about it. Yeah, don't worry about it, or something like that. Don't worry about it. And so let's just say if you're going to maybe be typing that in all caps or something like that, and maybe include like a little apostrophe mark or something like that right there, and people will likely want to know too that okay, well, I'm just concerned about it, or if anything, I thought I'd ask, and so yeah, so it sure seems that way that a lot of the things, a lot of the emotional feelings that you cannot see, just because that you're not really, I'm like, you can't really tell how that person is looking, what is thinking about, but let's just say that on average that for most writers would probably say that, do you think that it's important to know exactly how that person is feeling, and how the reader is thinking, what they're thinking about whenever you're talking about something, and that's why it sure seems that way that what exactly is it that our language is actually speaking out whenever it comes to understanding about whenever we include on a source of saying a complete sentence. And let's just say that if one of those sentences may be going to include I or my or something like that. I or my. I or my. And that's why it sure seems that way that, I or mine. I or my or us or something like that. So it sure seems that way that every time we think about writing a letter or any source of word of saying, and it sure seems that way that do we really feel annoyed when we start talking about something, and maybe start answering one or two questions, or maybe even three questions. And like I said, is there any order from how you want those questions answered? And most of the time, everybody's maybe going to be about it, says, yeah, well, never mind. And I know that that's usually like everybody else might even say too, that yeah, never mind, to help correct them. But and let's just say if somebody does say like, yeah, never mind, and what does never mind mean? What does never mind mean? Well, never mind means that don't answer. Don't answer her. Not right now. So yeah. So in case of a lot of times it's like if somebody were to be asking a question or telling you something, and it's like, never mind. I'm not saying anything. but still, it's like, yeah. So it sure seems that way that whenever it comes to conversations, most of the time that whenever you do start a conversation, a lot of times, and there are a few conversations that do go very well, and some of them that really get out of hand, and some of them that it seems like that people are just wanting too much information about something, or if anything, that what don't you understand? Well, what do you need to know? And so most of the time, most questions, most surveys should only take about 15-20 minutes, to answer them, right? But let's just say if we're talking about that, if somebody continues to ask the questions and continues to get nosy about something, and you want to know too that whenever it comes to writing a complete sentence, that it's really hard for you to write and finish that complete sentence whenever you got somebody who's going to be kind of pagging in and just start saying, asking the questions, and maybe start saying like, well, what is that supposed to mean? And so it sure seems that way that whenever you do start writing a sentence, a lot of times, and maybe that's another reason, maybe why that the chat sections are available, is so that way you can go ahead and write down for what comes to your mind, especially if you're in a meeting and people want to go ahead and chat and talk about whichever that's going to be on their mind. But it sure seems that way that maybe that's another reason why that transcripts are recorded, just because of the fact that they're able to read on there for who said what, who was participating in the meeting, and what was being discussed. And a lot of times it's like, you don't really want the times for whenever you got mad at the conversation and mad and aggravated. And that's why, like everybody want to know too, that whenever you do start a conversation about something, that if you just start writing in a few words and start getting all mad and all that, and just say, something like, yeah, you start getting mad, and you want to know too that you don't really need to have that recorded on any source of transcript or anything like that. But still, that talk about for calm and cool. So talk about for calm, cool. So a lot of times it sure seems that way, that when we talk about transcripts, a lot of times that especially if you're just typing in a few words of saying, and people want to know too that if you get mad enough, and down there at the middle, at the center right here, maybe somewhere on the bottom, if you get mad enough, and then you start jotting down a few, you type in a few keys, and you're like, oh yeah, so it sure seems that way that whenever you do start a conversation, a lot of times, and if you get mad enough, and I'm like, yeah, say things that you don't realize, that you don't mean, that you say, and all that, and so that's why it sure seems that way, that you think that maybe it is important to know about the keywords, about that. If you could maybe on your phone set that to where that keywords that you can use in a phrase, and if you do if anything, maybe just 5 buttons that you have to remember to be able to type. You to type a few keywords, and so that's why it sure seems that way. Why is it that maybe writing a message in a conversation is not just a typical alphabet, 1, 2, 3, or the A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Half the time you want to know too that if we're wondering toward it, any other sorts of signs and symbols that we may want to know too. I don't know what this means, but I see it on a text message right here, or something like that, and so it sure seems that way that when we do start a conversation, a lot of times that you want to know too that you start a conversation a lot of times, and you're wondering to where certain keys on the keyboard and all that. Maybe a lot of things that you don't quite, the things that you're typing and all. But yeah, don't worry about that. Don't worry about that. But still, so if we're talking about that, you're trying to write a letter and say, for why do moments always have to start out with a strange look? And that strange look that I'm talking about could also include toward something unexpectedly comes up, or something like, that you were expecting to meet somebody special, with that nice dress or that nice outfit that you had on, or something like that. Maybe at the coffee shop, or maybe at the bakery or something, somewhere like that. And so that's why it sure seems that way. That whenever we talk about writing, though, that you want to know too that you start a conversation, and then maybe if you know, like, somebody who's going to be reading your writing and thinking this toward, just in case if you don't quite understand what I'm saying here, that I'll go ahead and include a sticker right here. Sticker, and just say, well, just so that way, I can come back to explain that more. And so I really don't know, like anybody say too, that if stickers are really or for that purpose. So you're probably thinking too that if you want to go ahead and place a sticker right there, so that way you can come back to explaining that if you were not able to finish up what you were trying to say or something like that. But people might even say that that don't really, if you include, put a horse right there or something like that on the end of that sentence, and maybe put a heart symbol right there. I'm like, you don't want to know the answer to. So it's like, so if you were to put a sticker like at the end, I'm like, So why exactly would you do that? And like anybody say too, if you're just for that reason at all, to why you're doing that is so that way that you can just like anybody might even say that those are symbols. Those are supposed to be like symbols, aren't they? It's like whenever you do start a conversation, a lot of times, that what you are pretty much doing is that you were anybody who could be reading over a letter, if you're trying to send a letter to somebody, and maybe if you don't know how the conversation should start, or maybe something that you were thinking about, that was kind of like, well, what if they say this, or what if they say that? And if you write maybe a one or two sentences about something that somebody could say, and then if you were to maybe include a question mark and a symbol like that. So it seems like to me that you would really use symbols like that, mainly about the fact about, so that way that people, I'm like, the main reason why that you would use those, if anything, is in the chat, right? Chat, or anything. But on the other hand, too, if we're talking about, maybe anything confidential or anything like that, that we're talking about, is that whenever you do write a letter, though, that we're not talking about ABC order right here. Where we're talking about is toward it, that one paragraph that includes a JY or something like that, or KY or something like that. So it sure seems that way, that the symbols are going to include an L9 or something like that, or a BY. BY, well, what does that mean? Well, BYX or something like that. But still. So it sure seems that way that when we think about text messaging a lot of times, and it sure seems that way that why is it that that what I see right here is to where that whenever you do start a conversation with somebody about something, And it sure seems that way. That why is it that we always have to think about that you're going to get mad about something, but then you that what you're mad about is not being recorded, and until you actually type in a symbol, or maybe until you spell it out on the chat column. And it 102 that yeah, ways of how you can tell if that person is mad. And like, well, first of all, if they include all cap letters or something like that. But let's just say that they say that, yeah, if you get mad enough, and maybe if you're going to include a symbol such as, I'm mad, and yeah, if you're going to include a symbol or something like that, and I'll go ahead and, yeah, the mad symbol or something like that. Anybody say that? Yeah, really, I don't think anybody would even take a minute to find a symbol that you want to use for anything about what's on your mind. And but other than that it's like yeah, crazy, or something, like, yeah, the red face. I'm like, yeah, something like that. But anyway, so it sure seems that way. Yeah, you got the heart right there, and yeah, restaurants. And so it sure seems that way that whenever you're starting a conversation with anybody, really, that it's like you go ahead and yeah, all kinds of symbols right here. But still, but it sure seems that way that every time you do start writing about something, and it seems like it's almost always that you're thinking about that somebody that could be reading and thinking about what exactly that you're talking about, until that you start writing in some of the details. And so let's just say that if you did decide to go ahead and include a few stickers and a few of the paragraphs, just to kind of give them a clue of what you were referring to, and how many writers would maybe say if that's really just, if that's too professional or not. But anyway, but thanks for watching, everyone. And talk about for why do moments that seem to always start out with a strange look, but like everybody else might even say too, that really, it seems like it's all about the best, for what happens next, huh? But anyway, thanks for watching, everyone. Have a great day.